Welcome to Your Mythology Book Club. I'm Daniel, and I'm a Greek mythology enthusiast. In this series, we're covering the Iliad, and in this episode, we'll cover Book 21, which is the craziest, most bonkers book of the whole Iliad. If you were filming the Iliad, this book would take up most of your special effects budget. Just wait until we get into it, and you'll see how cataclysmic things are about to get. First, though, a quick recap of Book 20, where Achilles received brand new armor made by Hephaestus himself so that he could return to battle. Zeus gathered all of the gods to Olympus, well, all except the ocean itself, and commanded them to join the battle on whichever side they chose. Zeus did this because he foresaw, without divine intervention, Achilles would take the city of Troy that day, which he wasn't fated to do. Of course, Zeus knew that he was going to involve the gods to stop Achilles from taking Troy, so it does indeed seem that Achilles wasn't fated to take Troy that day, a day which will continue into Book 21. The gods then went down to the battlefield, and while the narrator paired them off as though they were about to duel one another then and there, the gods had other plans, namely, sitting on convenient perches and watching the humans do all the fighting. Achilles faced Aeneas, who ended up getting whisked away from the battlefield by Poseidon before he could get killed. Hector wanted to face Achilles and made a big speech about how he was going to get that Achilles. You guys just watch me. But then backed down immediately when Apollo told him not to be so stupid. But then Hector went off and faced Achilles anyway, when Achilles killed his youngest brother, Polydorus. It didn't go well for Hector. Athene just breathed and magically made his thrown spear just sort of slow down, turn around, and drop uselessly back down at his own feet. And then Apollo had absolutely no faith in his man. Like Aeneas, Hector just got carried up and off the battlefield to avoid certain death at the hands of Achilles. By the end of Book 20, Achilles was mid-rampage, killing any Trojans he could get his hands on, which is apparently anyone not important enough for a god to bother teleporting away from Achilles. And that's exactly where Book 21 picks up. Achilles still rampaging across the wide plain, headed toward the city of Troy, and apparently no number of Trojan soldiers are able to stop him, because the whole Trojan army is out there, against him alone it seems, and he's got free rein to do whatever he wants. Achilles has run far ahead of the rest of the Greeks. We didn't get a mention of any other Greeks in Book 20, and Book 21 continues this. We won't hear of any other Greeks in 21 either. It's Achilles versus the entire Trojan and Trojan allied forces, and it's not even close. Like herding cattle, he's chasing them wherever he will. The chased Trojans now split into two groups. One group evading Achilles by heading up onto the plain, moving toward the city. But evading Achilles doesn't help this group at all, because Hera now casts a divine obscuring mist to keep them from being able to find their way. And they're all trapped up there on the plain, bumbling into one another, lost and confused. But keep this group in mind for later on in Book 21. For now, we're following the other group of Trojans who are being chased by Achilles down to the lowlands of the Scamander River, where the Trojans, all in a panic, end up fleeing heedlessly into the swift-flowing river, men in full armor, and horses and chariots, shouting and screaming and getting pulled around by the swirling water. Seeing his victims as easy prey, all trapped in the river, Achilles, remember, nothing is in his heart now but vengeance for Patroclus. Calmly, this is cold, calmly, Achilles leans his long spear against a tree by the shore. This is no job for a spear. It requires a close work tool. And then, facing the river, Achilles leapt in, as it were a god, keeping his sword alone, and devised grim work at heart, and smote as he turned him every way about. And their groaning went up ghastly as they were stricken by the sword, and the water reddened with blood. As before a dolphin of huge maw fly other fish, and fill the nooks of some fair-haven bay in terror, for he devoureth a main whichsoever of them he may catch. So along the channels of that dread stream the Trojans, crouched beneath the precipitous sides. And when his hands were weary of slaughter, he chose 12 young men alive out of the river, an atonement for Patroclus, Menoetius' son, that was dead. These brought he forth amazed like fawns, and bound behind them their hands with well-cut thongs, which they themselves wore on their pliant doublets, and gave them to his comrades to lead down to the hollow ships. Then again he made his onset, athirst for slaying. Achilles has just filled the river with the slaughtered dead. Its flow is choked with corpses. Oh, and you'll remember that Achilles vowed to sacrifice 12 Trojan men to the memory of Patroclus. And so that it wouldn't only be he and the Greeks weeping at the funeral of Patroclus, Achilles wants to cause Trojans to weep at his beloved's funeral as well. These 12 men he's just taken captive will fulfill his grim oath, and with their deaths, many a Trojan mother, father, or beloved wife will weep, just as he and the Myrmidons will, at the terrible blood sacrifice to be held at Patroclus's grisly funeral. Achilles now returns to the fight and immediately recognizes his next opponent as Lycaon, yet another of Priam's 50 sons. This particular son has a history with Achilles, who had previously captured Lycaon and sold him into slavery. This was back when Achilles would accept anything other than death from his foes. Lycaon had been sent to the faraway isle of Lemnos in the North Aegean, where a friend had paid an exorbitant ransom for his freedom. He had returned from Lemnos only 11 days ago, but here he is again, facing Achilles once more. But Achilles no longer wants for anything material in this life. No ransom of gold or livestock or anything will sway him now. Seeing Lycaon, Achilles laughs. Ha! Verily great marvel is this that I behold with my eyes. Surely then will the proud Trojans whom I have slain rise up again from beneath the murky gloom, since thus hath this man come back escaped from his pitiless fate, though sold into goodly Lemnos, neither hath the deep of the hoary sea stayed him, that holdeth many against their will. But come then, of our spear's point shall he taste, that I may see and learn in my mind whether likewise he shall come back even from beneath, or whether the life-giving earth shall hold him down, she that holdeth so even the strong. Achilles, who has returned to using the long Pelion ash spear since he's come back up from the river, lifts this long and weighty weapon to smite Lycaon out of hand. But Lycaon does the unthinkable here. He ducks, dodges, and runs toward Achilles. Why? To grab him by the knees with one arm, while holding the Pelion ash at bay with the other, falling to his knees in supplication, begging for his life. I cry thee mercy, Achilles. Have thou regard and pity for me. To thee, O fosterling of Zeus, am I in the bonds of suppliantship. For at thy table first I tasted meal of Demeter on the day when thou didst take me captive in the well-ordered orchard, and didst sell me away from my father and my friends unto goodly Lemnos, and I fetched thee the price of 100 oxen. And now have I been ransomed for thrice that, and this is my 12th morn since I came to Ilios after much pain. Now once again hath ruinous fate delivered me into thy hands. Surely I must be hated of Father Zeus, that he hath given me a second time unto thee, and to short life my mother bare me, Laothoe, old Altes' daughter, Altes who ruleth among the war-loving Leleges, holding seat Pedasos on the Satnioeus. His daughter Priam had to wife, with many others, and of her were we two born. And thou wilt butcher both. Him among the foremost of the foot soldiers didst thou lay low, even godlike Polydoros, when thou smoteth him with thy sharp spear. And now it will go hard with me here, for no hope have I to escape thy hands, since God hath delivered me thereunto. Yet one thing will I tell thee, and do thou lay it to heart. Slay me not, since I am not of the same mother as Hector, who slew thy comrade, the gentle and brave. Lycaon is really debasing himself here. He's a son of the king of Troy, and he's just begging for his life. It's embarrassing. And before I break down his arguments for you, I want to point out something in the background During this whole first part of Book 21, Achilles is in and out of the river Scamander, and he's starting to make the river god, Xanthos, angry. It's not obvious just yet, but keep this growing anger in mind as we see scenes like we just did a few minutes ago, when Achilles chased a whole group of Trojans into the river and just went crazy slaughtering them, filling the river with blood and bodies. And here now we have a son of Priam begging for his life along the riverbank, and it's subtle, but Lycaon also references a river in his argument, mentioning his maternal grandfather Altes and his home along the Satnioeus River. Achilles' offenses against the Scamander river god will continue. I just want to point out this pattern as it's developing to be sure you notice it. Meanwhile, Lycaon's arguments to Achilles can be summed up as, "Don't kill me, Achilles, for two reasons. One, I've already proven I'm worth a big ransom to you, so I'll be worth it again. And two, your beef is with Hector, and even though Hector and I are both sons of Priam, we have different mothers. Having a different mother from Hector has got to count for something." But it doesn't count. It counts for nothing to Achilles, who responds, as the narrator says, in a voice implacable. "Fond fool, proffer me no ransom, nor these words. Until Patroclus met his fated day, then was it welcomer to my soul to spare the men of Troy, and many I took alive and sold beyond the sea. But now there is none shall escape death, whomsoever before Ilios God shall deliver into my hands. Yea, even among all Trojans, but chiefest among Priam's sons. Ay, friend, thou too must die. Why thus lamentest thou? Patroclus too is dead, who was better far than thou. Seest thou not also what manner of man am I for might and goodliness? And a good man was my father, and a goddess mother bare me. Yet over me too hang death and forceful fate. There cometh morn, or eve, or some noonday when my life too some man shall take in battle, whether with spear he smite me, or arrow from the string. Death comes for us all, Lycaon. It will come for me, and it's come for you now. There's nothing left inside Achilles. He's become death incarnate. He's accepted that the fate of mankind is death, death, and only death. He's become the agent of the fate of mankind. Wordlessly, Achilles now simply kills Lycaon, striking him with the sword along the collarbone, severing the blood vessels, which are now gushing their blood upon the earth. Achilles lifts Lycaon by the foot, his blood pouring out of him, and flings him into the river like a banana peel, saying carelessly to the body, "There lie thou among the fishes, which shall lick off thy wound's blood heedlessly, nor shall thy mother lay thee on a bed and mourn for thee, but Scamandros shall bear thee on his eddies into the broad bosom of the sea. Leaping along the wave shall many a fish dart up to the dark ripple to eat of the white flesh of Lycaon. So perish all, until we reach the citadel of sacred Ilios, ye flying, and I behind destroying. Nor even the river, fair flowing, silver eddied, shall avail you, to whom long time forsooth ye sacrifice many bulls, and among his eddies throw whole-hoofed horses down alive. For all this yet shall ye die the death, until ye pay all for Patroclus' slaying, and the slaughter of Achaeans, whom at the swift ships ye slew while I tarried afar." This is a far more direct offense against Xanthos. Achilles is casually littering a bleeding-out corpse into an already corpse-choked river, all the while musing about the fishes that will eat it as the river carries the body to the sea. Oh, and if that were not enough, Achilles is now openly mocking the river god's ability to prevent him from killing all the Trojans in the same manner, no matter how many bulls the Trojans might sacrifice to Xanthos. Achilles, the mortal human man, is saying that the divine, immortal god, Xanthos, cannot stop him. There are not many hard and fast rules in Greek mythology, but a human putting himself above the gods, any god, is about as close to a strictly followed rule as there is. I could list any number of examples of humans who suffered the most flagrant punishments for this kind of thing, but I won't pause the action for that. Even now, after all Achilles has done and said to offend him, Xanthos still doesn't rise up against Achilles. But finally, with this open display of pride, the narrator tells us that, "Thus spake Achilles, but the river waxed ever more wroth in his heart, and sought in his soul how he should stay goodly Achilles from his work, and ward destruction from the Trojans." In case you think Achilles is going to come to his senses and focus more on killing Trojans in ways that don't anger a river god, no, you're wrong. Achilles still isn't done unnecessarily angering the river. However, Xanthos has already taken some action. He's now put courage into the heart of a Trojan ally, the leader of the Paeonians named Asteropaios. We haven't heard of him before. Asteropaios is new to the scene and has the distinction of being ambidextrous. Oh, and he's the grandson of a river god, the Axios, in the region of what was Paeonia and Macedonia, what we now know as northern Greece. Asteropaios shows up suddenly wielding 2 spears. Ambidextrous, remember? Achilles must be a little taken aback. He hasn't had anyone really stand up to him yet since he's re-entered the war. It's just been him chasing and slaughtering. So he says to this newcomer Asteropaios, "Who and whence art thou of men, that darest to come against me? Ill-fated are they whose children match them with my might." And Asteropaios responds, "High-hearted son of Peleus, why askest thou my lineage? I come from deep-soiled Paeonia, a land far off, leading Paeonian men with their long spears, and this now is the 11th morn since I am come to Ilios. My lineage is of wide-flowing Axios, who begat Pelagon, famous with the spear, and he, men say, was my father. Now fight we, noble Achilles." Achilles lifts the mighty Pelian ash, preparing to run this fool through. But Asteropaios is quicker, and he can strike twice. He launches both his spears simultaneously. One is stopped by Achilles' shield, but with the other he grazed the elbow of Achilles' right arm, and there leapt forth dark blood. But the point beyond him fixed itself in the earth, eager to batten on flesh. Then in his turn Achilles hurled on Asteropaios his straight-flying ash, fain to have slain him, but missed the man, and struck the high bank, and quivering half its length in the bank, he left the ashen spear. So now Achilles' Pelian ash is embedded deep in the soft, muddy bank of the Scamander, behind Asteropaios, while Achilles has taken a minor wound to his elbow. Do you want me to tell you how many times Achilles gets wounded in the Iliad? Let's start a count. 1. Don't hold your breath, waiting for me to say 2. Achilles now draws his sword and starts coming at Asteropaios, who's already thrown his only 2 spears. He only has the 2 spears and no sword as a backup weapon. So Asteropaios frantically tries to pull the Pelian ash out of the muddy bank behind him. Pull! It won't come loose. Achilles is charging. Pull again! Nothing. It won't budge. Achilles is almost here. Pull a 3rd time, Asteropaios. No, it won't move. The spear is planted too deep in the mud. My gosh, how long does it take Achilles to get here? Pull a 4th time. Oh no, too late. Achilles, closing on him, reft him of life with his sword. For in the belly he smote him beside the navel, and all his bowels gushed out to the earth, and darkness covered his eyes as he lay gasping. Then Achilles, trampling on his breast, stripped off his armor and spake exultingly, "Lie there! It is hard to strive against children of Cronos' mighty son, even though one be sprung from a river god. Thou truly declarest thyself the seed of a wide-flowing river, but I avow me of the lineage of great Zeus. My sire is a man ruling many Myrmidons, Peleus, the son of Aeacos, and Aeacos was begotten of Zeus. As Zeus is mightier than seaward murmuring rivers, so is the seed of Zeus made mightier than the seed of a river. Nay, there is hard beside thee a great river, if he may anywise avail. But against Zeus, the son of Cronos, it is not possible to fight. For him, not even King Achelous is a match, nor yet the great strength of deep-flowing ocean, from whom all rivers flow, and every sea, and all springs and deep wells. Yea, even he hath fear of the lightning of great Zeus, and his dread thunder, when it pealeth out of heaven. Well, that whole speech was just a big, unnecessary screw you to the river that's flowing right next to Achilles, who now, pretty casually, pulls his spear out of the muddy bank, a task that was beyond all the frantic, oh my gosh, I'm about to die, strength that Asteropios couldn't muster. Dead, Asteropios flops into the river. Around him, eels and fishes swarmed, tearing and gnawing the fat about his kidneys. But Achilles went on after the charioted Paeones, who still along the eddying river huddled in fear, when they saw their best man in the stress of battle slain violently by the hands and the sword of the son of Peleus. There slew he Thyrsilokos and Mydon and Astapylos and Menessos and Thrysos and Aeneos and Ophelestes, and yet more of the Paeones would swift Achilles have slain, had not the deep eddying river called unto him in wrath, in semblance of a man, and from an eddy's depth sent forth a voice. O Achilles, thy might and thy evil work are beyond the measure of men, for gods themselves are ever helping thee. If indeed the son of Cronos hath delivered thee all the Trojans to destroy, at least drive them forth from me, and do thy grim deeds on the plain. For filled with dead men is my pleasant bed, nor can I pour my stream to the great sea, being choked with dead, and thou slayest ruthlessly. Come then, let be. I am astonied, O captain of hosts. And to him answered Achilles fleet of foot. So be it, heaven-sprung Scamandros, even as thou biddest. But the proud Trojans I will not cease from slaying until I have driven them to their city and have made trial with Hector face to face, whether he is to vanquish me or I him. So after all that, all the insults unnecessarily directed at Xanthos, and the killing, and the filling his waters with corpses, and then the killing of the guy Xanthos had fired up to protect himself from Achilles, and then even more killing and corpses in his waters, Xanthos is still only saying, hey Achilles, maybe just take the killing up onto the plain for a while, huh? Chase the Trojans up onto the plain and kill them up there for a while, please. This is the most patient river god imaginable. And Achilles says to Xanthos, sure, whatever, man. I've got to just keep on killing Trojans and have my duel with Hector. So that should be the end of it, right? All this build-up toward a conflict between Achilles and Xanthos really should just end here, right? But Achilles, he now sees more Trojans, and oops, they're in the river. What's he supposed to do? Not kill Trojans? But that is all Xanthos is going to take. He is fed up, and he thinks Apollo is the one to blame for not helping the Trojans more, because Xanthos now calls out to Apollo. Out on it, Lord of the silver bow, child of Zeus, thou hast not kept the ordinance of Cronos' son, who charged thee straitly to stand by the Trojans and to help them, until eve comes with light late setting and darken the deep-soiled earth. Xanthos is reminding Apollo that Zeus has actually ordered the gods to all fight today. Where are you, Apollo? Why is Achilles left to run amok? Now, meanwhile, at this very moment that Xanthos has finally had enough, Achilles chooses this very moment to leap from the bank to get at those Trojans in the river. And Achilles is not prepared for Xanthos' response, who finally and suddenly has run out of his previously infinite-seeming patience. Spear-famed Achilles sprang from the bank and leapt into its midst, but Xanthos rushed on him in a furious wave and stirred up all his streams in tumult. and swept down the many dead who lay thick in him, slain by Achilles. These out to land he cast, with bellowing like a bull, and saved the living under his fair streams, hiding them within eddies deep and wide. But terribly around Achilles arose his tumultuous wave, and the stream smote violently against his shield, nor avail he to stand firm upon his feet. Then he grasped a tall, fair-grown elm, and it fell uprooted and tore away all the bank, and reached over the fair riverbed with its thick shoots, and stemmed the river himself, falling all within him. And Achilles, struggling out of the eddy, made haste to fly over the plain with his swift feet, for he was afraid. But the great god ceased not, but arose upon him with darkness on his crest, that he might stay noble Achilles from slaughter, and ward destruction from the men of Troy. And the son of Peleus rushed away a spear's throw, with the swoop of a black eagle, the mighty hunter, strongest at once and swiftest of winged birds. Like him he sped, and on his breast the bronze rang terribly as he fled from beneath the onset, and behind him the river rushed on with a mighty roar. Ever the river wave caught up Achilles for all his speed, for gods are mightier than men. For whensoever fleet-footed noble Achilles struggled to stand against it, and know whether all immortals be upon him who inhabit spacious heaven, then would a great wave of the heaven-sprung river beat upon his shoulders from above, and he sprang upward with his feet, sore vexed at heart. And the river was wearying his knees with violent rush beneath, and devouring the earth from under his feet. Then the son of Peleus cried aloud, looking up to the broad heaven, Zeus, Father, how doth none of the gods take it on him in pity to save me from the river? After that let come to me what may. None other of the inhabitants of heaven is changeable so much, but only my dear mother, who beguiled me with false words, saying that under the wall of the mail-clad men of Troy I must die by the swift arrows of Apollo. Would that Hector had slain me, the best of men bred here. Then brave had been the slayer, and a brave man had he slain. But now by a sorry death am I doomed to die, pent in this mighty river, like a swineherd boy whom a torrent sweepeth down as he essayeth to cross it in a storm. Achilles is struggling against the river, battered by waves, the earth underneath his feet being rapidly washed away, eroded underneath him by the flood. He calls out to heaven for aid, and quickly Poseidon and Athene came near and stood beside him in the likeness of men, and taking his hands in theirs, pledged him in words. And the first that spake was Poseidon, shaker of the earth. Son of Peleus, tremble not, neither be afraid. Such helpers of thee are we from the gods, approved of Zeus, even Pallas Athene and I. For to be vanquished of a river is not appointed thee. But he will soon give back, and thou wilt thyself perceive it. But we will give thee wise counsel if thou wilt obey it. Hold not thy hand from hazardous battle until within Ilios' famous walls thou have pent the Trojan host, even all that flee before thee. But do thou, when thou hast taken the life of Hector, go back unto the ships. This glory we give unto thee to win. Now, obeying the order of Poseidon to keep moving toward Troy and to keep killing and chasing Trojans, Achilles moves away from the river and is now crossing the plain, which is awash with floodwaters and littered with the dead. And he's making progress, although Xanthos isn't making it easy on him. But Athene is giving him her strength, and he's struggling forward through this inundated wasteland of carnage. But Xanthos is not willing to let Achilles go now. Xanthos was slow to anger, but his anger is boiling over now. Xanthos calls for help from the Simois, a tributary river of the Scamander, a rapid mountain stream flowing from the slopes of Mount Ida. Dear brother, the strength of this man let us both join to stay, since quickly he will lay waste the great city of King Priam, and the Trojans abide not in the battle. Help me with speed, and fill thy streams with water from thy springs, and urge on all thy torrents, and raise up a great wave, and stir huge roaring of tree stumps and stones, that we may stay the fierce man, who now is lording it, and deeming himself match for the gods. For neither, I ween, will strength avail him, nor comeliness anywise, nor that armor beautiful, which deep beside the flood shall be o'erlaid with slime, and himself I will wrap him in my sands, and pour round him countless shingle without stint. Nor shall the Achaeans know where to gather his bones, so vast a shroud of silt will I heap over them. Where he dieth, there shall be his tomb, neither shall he have need of any barrow to be raised, when the Achaeans make his funeral. The Simois, being a rapid mountain stream, can gather a great deal of power from his source. This is exactly what Xanthos is looking for to stop Achilles as this new flood comes rushing down from the north. Then did a dark wave of the heaven-sprung river stand towering up and would overwhelm the son of Peleus. But Hera cried aloud in terror for Achilles, lest the great deep eddying river sweep him away. And straightway she called to Hephaestus, her dear son, Rise, lame god, O my son. It was against thee we thought that eddying Xanthos was matched in fight. Help with all speed, put forth large blast of flame. Then will I go to raise a strong storm out of the sea of the west wind and the white south, which shall utterly consume the dead Trojans and their armor, blowing the angry flame. Thou along Xanthos' bank burn up his trees and wrap himself in fire, nor let him anywise turn thee back by soft words or by threat, nor stay thy rage. Only when I cry to thee with my voice, then hold the unwearying fire. Hera is not having it. Not her hero, not today, not when the best of the Olympians, her side, have their pride on the line. She's calling on her son Hephaestus, who is ultimately loyal only to her. In some versions of his origin, Hera had Hephaestus without the aid of Zeus, as a mirror image of Athene, who has only Zeus as a parent. And Hephaestus answers his mother immediately. He's the god of metalworking and a skilled craftsman, sure, but he's also the god of fire, volcanic fire. First, on the plain, fire blazed, and burnt the many dead who lay there thick, slain by Achilles. And all the plain was parched, and the bright water stayed. And as when in late summer the north wind swiftly parcheth a new watered orchard, and he that tilleth it is glad, thus was the whole plain parched, and Hephaestus consumed the dead. Then against the river he turned his gleaming flame. Elms burnt, and willow trees and tamarisks, and lotos burn, and rush, and galingale, which round the fair streams of the river grew in multitude. And the eels and fishes beneath the eddies were afflicted, which through the fair streams tumbled this way and that, in anguish at the blast of crafty Hephaestus. And the strong river burned, and spake, and called to him by name, Hephaestus, there is no god can match with thee, nor will I fight thee thus ablaze with fire. Cease strife, yea, let noble Achilles drive the Trojans forthwith out of their city. What have I to do with strife and succor? Thus spake he, burnt with fire, for his fair streams were bubbling. And as a cauldron boileth within, beset with much fire, melting the lard of some fatted hog, spurting up on all sides, and logs of firewood lie thereunder, so burned his fair streams in the fire, and the water boiled. He had no mind to flow, but refrained him, for the breath of cunning Hephaestus violently afflicted him. Then unto Hera, earnestly beseeching her, he spake winged words, Hera, wherefore hath thy son assailed my stream to vex it above others? I am less chargeable than all the rest that are helpers of the Trojans. But lo, I will give over, if thou wilt, and let thy son give over too. And I further will swear even this, that never will I ward the day of evil from the Trojans, not even when all Troy is burning in the blaze of hungry fire, and the warlike sons of Achaeans are the burners thereof. Xanthos is beaten, bubbling, burning, baking, blistering, boiling away, and hearing him crying out for help, Hera, very demurely, says to her son Hephaestus, Hephaestus, hold, famed son, it befitteth not thus, for mortal's sake, to do violence to an immortal god. Now, you know Hera well enough by now to know she is loving this, just absolutely loving it. And her understated way of telling her son to desist is Hera being very magnificently Hera. She is every bit the tyrant Zeus is, but she's got more self-control and much, much more style than he ever did. And this right here is prime Hera time. File this away under why you do not mess with her. Seeing this open conflict between two gods, between Hephaestus at the command of Hera versus Xanthos. This has riled up all those other gods who previously had been content to sit on their perches and watch the humans fight. The duels of the gods are at hand. And they clashed together with a great noise, and the wide earth groaned, and the clarion of great heaven rang around. Zeus heard as he sate upon Olympus, and his heart within him laughed pleasantly when he beheld that strife of the gods. Zeus will now be the only god watching, and he will love it. We'll go now through each of those divine pairings that the narrator spelled out for us in Book 20. First up, wow, starting off with a great matchup, Ares versus Athene. Ares, piercer of shields, began the battle and first made for Athene with his bronze spear and spake a taunting word. Wherefore, O dogfly, dost thou match gods with gods in strife, with stormy daring, as thy great spirit moveth thee? Rememberest thou not how thou movest Diomedes, Tydeus' son, to wound me, and thyself didst take a visible spear, and thrust it straight at me, and pierce through my fair skin? Therefore deem I now that thou shalt pay me for all that thou hast done. Ares is still bitter about that time way back in Book 5 when Athene, using the invisibility granted her by Hades' helmet, concealed her presence from Ares, who thought he was just going up against the mortal warrior Diomedes. Then, surprise, stabbed by Athene. The insult dogfly is a reference to the biting flies, still known as dogflies or stable flies, that subsist by biting and drinking blood. Ares' attack, however, is disappointing. Like everything else he does in the Iliad, uselessly striking the aegis that Athene is carrying. You don't think this is going to end well for Ares, do you? With one hand, she grasps a stone that lay upon the plain, black, rugged, huge, which men of old time set to be the landmark of a field. This hurled she, and smote impetuous Ares on the neck, and unstrung his limbs. 7 roods he covered in his fall, and soiled his hair with dust, and his armor rang upon him. And Pallas Athene laughed, and spake to him winged words exultingly. Fool, not even yet hast thou learned how far better than thou I claim to be, that thus thou matchest thy might with mine. Thus shalt thou satisfy thy mother's curses, who deviseth mischief against thee in her wrath, for that thou hast left the Achaeans, and givest the proud Trojans aid. It never was going to end well for Ares. Athene is absolutely unstoppable. I can't think of any story in which she doesn't come out on top. But we're not done with this matchup. Now, Aphrodite shows up and takes Ares by the hand, who's groaning constantly. And Aphrodite is trying to lead Ares away from the battlefield. Hera, still all fired up for her divine team to win the day, commands Athene to stop Aphrodite from helping Ares. No sooner said than done, Athene catches up to the retreating pair and stabs Aphrodite, who falls to the earth, and Ares with her. So they twain lay on the bounteous earth, and she spake winged words exultingly, such let all be who give the Trojans aid when they fight against the mailed Argives. Be they even so bold and brave as Aphrodite when she came to succor Ares and defied my might. Then should we long ago have ceased from war, having laid waste the established citadel of Ilios. That's your Athene versus Ares matchup, with a clear victory for the pro-Greek side. The next matchup is Apollo versus Poseidon. Poseidon kicks things off with a long speech. Phoebus, why stand we apart? It befitteth not after the rest have begun. That were the most shameful if without fighting we should go to Olympus to the bronze-thresholded house of Zeus. Begin, for thou art younger. It were not meet for me, since I was born first, and no more. Fond God, how foolish is thy heart! Thou rememberest not all the ills we twain alone of gods endured at Ilios, when by ordinance of Zeus we came to proud Laomedon, and served him through a year for promised recompense. And he laid on us his commands. I round their city built the Trojans a wall, wide and most fair, that the city might be unstormed, and thou, Phoebus, didst herd shambling, crook-horned kine among the spears of woody, many-folded Ida. But when the joyous seasons were accomplished the term of hire, then redoubtable Laomedon robbed us of all hire, and sent us off with threats. He threatened that he would bind together our feet and hands, and sell us into far-off isles. And the ears of both of us he vowed to shear off with the sword. So we went home with angry hearts, wroth for the hire he promised and gave us not. To his folk now thou showest favor, nor essayest with us how the proud Trojans may be brought low and perish miserably with their children and noble wives. Poseidon has shared a long reference to his and Apollo's adventures together, which we've already discussed, when they built the walls of Troy together, when they were sent to labor as punishment from Zeus for their part in a failed coup against his rule. While Poseidon starts off saying it would be shameful if they returned to Olympus without fighting, the long, rambly old man speech doesn't make it seem like his heart is actually in a fight with his nephew. And Apollo doesn't seem to want to fight his uncle either, responding, Shaker of the earth, of no sound mind wouldst thou repute me if I should fight against thee for the sake of pitiful mortals, who, like unto leaves, now living glowing life, consuming the fruit of the earth, and now again pine unto death. Let us with all speed cease from combat, and let them do battle by themselves. Now, shamed by this refusal to fight, Apollo's sister Artemis now interjects, and we haven't heard much from her at all in the Iliad. So then thou fleest, far darter, and hast quite yielded to Poseidon the victory, and given him glory for naught. Fond God, why bearest thou an ineffectual bow in vain? Let me not hear thee again in the halls of our sire boast, as before, among the immortal gods, that thou wouldst stand up to fight against Poseidon. Apollo just doesn't even answer his sister Artemis. But he doesn't have to. On the scene immediately is Hera, and still stirring the pot as always, Hera gets right into Artemis's face. How now art thou fain, bold vixen, to set thyself against me? Hard were it for thee to match my might, bow-bearer though thou art, since against women Zeus made thee a lion, and giveth thee to slay whomso of them thou wilt. Truly it is better on the mountains to slay wild beasts and deer than to fight amain with mightier than thou. But if thou wilt, try war, that thou mayest know well how far stronger am I, since thou matchest thy might with mine. And with that, like a mother scolding a naughty child, Hera grasps both of Artemis's wrists in one of her hands to restrain Artemis, while with the other hand, Hera takes Artemis's bow that had been slung across her back and boxes her ears with it, beating Artemis over the head with her own weapon. Hera is smiling the whole time she's doing this. And once Artemis is released, the poor girl goes running off weeping, her bow and arrows falling scattered across the battlefield. So now we've had 3 duels, and so far the pro-Greek side has won each, or 2 wins and a default victory if you view Apollo's ceding to Poseidon that way. Now Hermes, a nominally pro-Greek god, but not one we've seen get very involved so far, turns to Leto, the mother of Apollo and Artemis, and herself nominally pro-Trojan, but equally distant from the action. And Hermes says to Leto, Leto, with thee will I nowise fight. A grievous thing it is to come to blows with wives of cloud-gathering Zeus. But boast to thy heart's content among the immortals that thou didst vanquish me by might and main. Having won a default victory from Hermes, Leto now gathers up her daughter's fallen bow and arrows. So we're at what? 3 Greek wins to 1 Trojan win now? But there was one other pairing mentioned by the narrator back in book 20, and it was Hephaestus versus Xanthos. And that's already been very clearly decided. Final score, 4-1, and a convincing victory goes to the pro-Greek side. Now, the scene shifts briefly to Olympus, where we find Artemis has run up to Zeus on his throne and thrown herself into his lap, crying. Bemused, Zeus gently asks his daughter, "Who of the inhabitants of heaven, dear child, hath dealt with thee thus hastily, as though thou hadst been doing some wrong thing openly?" And Artemis replies, "It was thy wife that buffeted me, father, the white-armed Hera, from whom our strife and contention come upon the immortals." Artemis is characterized here as a little girl, which is colorful in a story with few children, but this is not at all the most interesting version of Artemis you'll find elsewhere. There is so very much more to her elsewhere in mythology. She's an incredibly important goddess with such an overwhelming wealth of mythology and religious importance, but unfortunately the Iliad just isn't her best appearance. Now we return to the battlefield, where we see Apollo entering into the city of Troy to defend it himself, because he fears that Achilles may take it single-handedly before the day is out. However, with the duels over, the other gods all return to Olympus. Achilles is out on the plain, still just slaughtering the Trojan army. Atop the great tower of Troy, King Priam is watching with grief the carnage below. Like Apollo, he can see the destruction being wrought by Achilles, and must also be fearing the final destruction of Troy and for the safety of his remaining troops, who are now streaming towards the city and its shut gate, all fleeing ahead of Achilles. The old king calls out to those manning the gate below, "Hold open the gates in your hands until the folk come to the city in their rout, for closely is Achilles chasing them. Now, trow I, there will be deadly deeds. But when they are gathered within the wall and are taking breath, then again shut back the gate wings firmly builded, for I fear lest that murderous man spring in within the wall." Priam wants the gate wardens to be ready and to be quick. Hold open the gates to let in as many fleeing Trojans as possible, but be prepared to shut the gates quickly on Achilles. He is unstoppable. He will take the city himself if he's able to get inside. Obeying, the wardens crack open the gates, and Apollo himself stands before the open gate to allow the Trojans to pass, but to prevent the approaching Achilles from entering. And Apollo puts strength now into the Trojan warrior named Agenor to face Achilles while all others are fleeing him. Agenor realizes this new strength within him during an inner monologue where he questions his own bravery internally and comes to the conclusion that he must stand and fight. "I me, if I flee before mighty Achilles, there where the rest are driven terror-struck, natheless will he overtake me and slaughter me as a coward. Or what if I leave these to be driven before Achilles, the son of Peleus, and flee upon my feet from the wall by another way to the Ilian plain, until I come to the spurs of Ida, and hide me in the underwood, so that at evening, having bathed in the river and refreshed me of sweat, I might return to Ilios? Nay, why doth my heart debate thus within me? Lest he might be aware of me as I get me from the city for the plain, and speeding after overtake me with swift feet, then it will no more be possible to avoid the visitation of death, for he is exceedingly mighty above all mankind. What then, if in front of the city I go forth to meet him? Surely his flesh too is penetrable by sharp bronze, and there is but one life within, and men say he is mortal, howbeit Zeus, the son of Cronos, giveth him renown." And so there, before the gates of Troy, alongside Phoebus Apollo, stands Agenor, son of Antenor, to protect the Trojan army in its rout by Achilles, sacrificing himself so that some remnant of the Trojan army can survive and hold the city. As Achilles approaches, Agenor calls out to him, "Doubtless thou hopest in thy heart, noble Achilles, on this day to sack the city of the proud men of Troy. Fond man, there shall be many woeful things yet wrought before it, for within it are many men and staunch, who in front of our parents dear and our wives and sons keep Ilios safe. But thou shalt here meet death. albeit so redoubtable and bold a man of war, he said, and hurled his sharp spear with weighty hand, and smote him on the leg beneath the knee, nor missed his mark, and the greave of new-wrought tin rang terribly on him. But the bronze bounded back from him it smote, nor pierced him, for the god's gift drave it back. Agenor's cast failed. His spear was stopped entirely by Achilles' divinely made armor. And now Agenor is in a world of hurt because Achilles has been distracted from his run where he was headed directly towards the city gate, which is still open, still receiving fleeing Trojans. But this distraction was Apollo's plan. The god of prophecy knew that this would be the outcome. And the god also had a plan for Agenor, who stood bravely and faced his foe despite not knowing Apollo's plan, which involved taking Agenor's place now in the eyes of Achilles. For next we read that, then the son of Peleus in his turn made at godlike Agenor, but Apollo suffered him not to win renown, but caught away Agenor and shrouded him in thick mist, and set him in peace to be gone out of the war. Then by wile he kept the son of Peleus away from the folk, for in complete semblance of Agenor himself he stood before the feet of Achilles, who hasted to run upon him and chase him. And while he chased him over the wheat-bearing plain, edging him toward the deep-eddying river Scamandros, as he ran but a little in front of him, for by wile Apollo beguiled him, that he kept ever hoping to overtake him in the race. Meantime the other Trojans in common rout came gladly unto their fastness, and the city was filled with the throng of them. Neither had they heart to await one another outside the city and wall, and to know who might have escaped, and who had perished in the fight, but impetuously they poured into the city, whomsoever of them his feet and knees might save. Achilles' solo fight against the entire Trojan army is ended, with the hero in his rage uselessly chasing Apollo, Agenor he thinks, around the field, while the Trojan army safely retreats behind its divinely built walls, and the gates are shut. All the Trojans are safe now, all within those legendary walls, all except one Trojan. Come back next time for the Iliad, Book 22, the last battle book and the final showdown. One Greek, one Trojan, one man will face his fate. Till next time, this has been Daniel with Your Mythology Book Club. Thanks for listening.